state has offered substantial evidence that defendant procured fentanyl on more than one occasion, and on at least one occasion deployed that fentanyl to cause the death of another person. As a general matter, an individual who is capable of this kind of decision-making is not a good candidate for supervision in the community. More specifically, given the uniquely dangerous nature of fentanyl, which has been demonstrated tragically by events in Summit County, defendant's alleged conduct, as supported by substantial evidence, is especially dangerous. Indeed, these circumstances constitute clear and convincing evidence that defendant would pose a substantial danger to the community if released on bail, a substantial danger that cannot be adequately managed by any combination of conditions of pretrial release that are available in Summit County. For these reasons, the court finds the circumstances of this case, as supported by substantial evidence, weigh soundly against any form of pretrial release. The state's motion for pretrial detention is granted. Defendant Kouri Richins shall continue to be detained without bail during the time she awaits trial or other resolution of the criminal charges against her.
Well, hey folks, it's Mike from Profiling Evil. I thought I'd take some time this evening on my way up to do some fence repair up at our mountain property and talk a little bit about the Kouri Richins case. And I thought, what better way to do this than to head right up to Kamas, Utah, where Eric Richins died. I thought that might give you a little sense for the area, the kind of place in which this couple lived, and maybe make the story a little interesting as we travel along. Now, I don't know how many of you are Web Sleuth fans, but actually I'm up in the area where Tricia used to live. Here on the way, we're just coming up on Wanship Reservoir for those of you that want to try to check it out. Had to pull over for a moment while the police spun by me. Who knows where they're going. Anyway, let's get back to our trip here. So we're passing an area called Wanship. Rockport Dam is kind of the term we've always used for it. It's an absolutely beautiful area up here. So we're driving up to Kamas, Utah, the location where Kouri Richins is alleged to have murdered her husband, Eric. And the story actually goes back a number of years. In fact, right at the time they were getting married, according to the documents I've been able to find online, including some of the court documents that have been published, Kouri was surprised just moments before their wedding with a prenuptial agreement, something that she wasn't expecting. A family member presented her with the document, and just before walking down the aisle, she was forced to sign that before the marriage could take place. Now, I suspect that was pretty darn troubling, especially knowing that she was marrying a contractor, somebody that she met while she was working in a lumber and hardware store, and started dating. He was a contractor that came in on a regular basis. She worked the counter helping the contractors that came in get their orders. And so I'm sure that was really troubling to her when it happened. But now she's getting married, getting ready to walk down the aisle, and she's presented with a prenuptial agreement, which again, I'm sure was pretty dang upsetting, and especially moments before your wedding, if in fact that's all true. And I guess we'll just have to wait to see if that comes out in court and is actually proven that that's the case. But in that prenuptial agreement, she was prevented from having access to all of the assets. But over time, as the business built, she apparently got access to power of attorney, to being able to work with some of the business records, to be able to access the business accounts, because it's alleged that during that time, she, especially in the last year before his death, took some liberties that appear to be pretty strange, things that would have benefited her personally. She had a business that was, by all accounts, pretty darn successful. In fact, according to court documents and testimony that came out in court, for the most part, her business was in the black and was doing well. But she was kind of flipping houses, buying homes and reselling them. She was in the middle of an incredibly expensive purchase of a home in Midway, Utah. And I'm going to just show you some imagery from that home as we talk, so that you can get a sense for the size of that home, multi-million-dollar home, and the kind of place and the debt that she would jump into from time to time. Now, one of the reports that became so interesting is during this time when she's starting to access some of the business funds, some people say up to $30,000 worth of business funds that she put into her own hands and into her own use.
Also joining us from Salt Lake City, Utah, religious cult expert, retired police commander, host of the Profiling Evil podcast, author of the book Deceived, Mike King is back with us. Mike, I'm going to start with you. This is classic motive stuff. It's about money. It's about greed. I'm just shocked, though, because you're married to a very successful man, that there was no way to make it work financially with him alive.
Yeah, this one is really interesting because what we're learning is that there was a pre-marriage agreement, if I'm understanding what I've read online, that precluded and separated the funds. And so she was creating a business of her own, apparently doing quite well in the realty side of the business, but they were doing a little bit of Peter to robbing Peter to pay Paul to keep up on top of these things. And now with this forensic accountant, we're starting to learn that they were moving money, or at least she was moving money allegedly without his permission, using powers of attorney, going into bank accounts, moving business money to make it appear that it's legitimate in nature to fund these projects. And I thought it was interesting when the forensic accountant brought out the fact that flipping houses is a high-risk business and expensive. People put a lot of money into it, and that they make a lot of money. And for the most part, they were staying in the black. But then she started seeing weird behavior. And isn't that what it's all about when we see these things start to unravel? Is all of a sudden the behavior and the normalcy starts to change, and that's what the investigators can capitalize on to prove that there was something suspicious going on.
Yeah. My guess is she may be flipping channels back and forth between court TV and spousal murder cases and HGTV, figuring out how to flip houses, and she got confused. Because, I mean, that's what I see here.
That it was during this time that she and her husband, who they traveled quite frequently together, oftentimes overseas, they went to Greece. And on one particular occasion in Greece, he got incredibly ill after eating. Now, people are pointing to this being the first murder attempt. I'm not sure exactly how they're coming up with that decision, other than the fact that it was allegedly something that was repeated several times. But here's the thing that's so intriguing about that, is that there were friends with them on the trip that didn't see her slip anything into the food that Eric ate, that he became violently ill after eating. So the question becomes, was it just happen chance, or was it in fact truly a murder attempt? And the thing that I'd like to know more about, that I hope comes out in the trial, is whether Eric had allergies, like a peanut allergy or a bee sting allergy reaction, something like that, because one of the questions was that he would have to find an EpiPen, and that they had EpiPens in the house. Was the EpiPen for him because he had this history? Was it for one of the children? What really brought those things together? And I think that's something that could be proven by medical records and other things to show whether he really did have a problem. Again, I don't know, but many people are alleging that that was the first murder attempt. Well, then we end up fast forwarding to February 14th, when he has another violent physical attack where he is so sick he has to go to bed, take Benadryl and other things. And I think the EpiPen comes in again during this event. But what's so peculiar about this particular event is in the B.O.L.O hearing recently, police were able to put someone on the stand that sold illegal drugs to Kouri, allegedly, just before February 14th. In addition to that, they found that there were searches online about fentanyl overdose. Now, the timing on this particular thing I'm going to talk about is really kind of intriguing, because one of those fentanyl searches was how much fentanyl is needed for an overdose. Now, that's really important, because the February 14th, Valentine's Day, I might add, ends up in a recovery. Eric recovers from this violent illness that he experiences. And he goes to bed, but he does recover from that. So keep that date in mind, February 14th, Valentine's Day. This event happens, which is almost life-ending. And now he recovers from that event, and time goes on. Now, so here's what's really important, folks. And I want to just kind of recap this date. Again, we're going to take that Greece incident and put it on a shelf. It might be a red herring. It could have been a homicide attempt. And I guess we'll only know if there's a confession that's given. But here's what gets interesting. Then we have the February 14th, Valentine's Day event. Just before Valentine's Day, when Eric has this catastrophic event, Kouri Richins reaches out to a drug dealer and purchases $900 worth of illicit fentanyl. That's a drug similar to what's used to knock people out for surgery. I mean, it is a powerful drug, and it is a scourge on our country. People are dying from fentanyl overdose all across the country. Eric has this very adverse reaction. In some people's estimation, nearly dies. And he also is so concerned that he tells people, hey, if something happens to me, I think my wife's trying to poison me. Now, that's a pretty powerful statement. I've never said that about my wife, and I would suspect most of you have never said that about your companion. But here he is saying this and saying, hey, I'm concerned. Now, fast forward a month. And this is what's really interesting to me, is about this same time, Kouri Richins allegedly reaches out to this same drug dealer and orders more fentanyl. And that illicit drug is delivered to her. She actually drives and meets them at a gas station, and law enforcement's able to put forensic pings from her phone, placing her at the location, the exact location where this drug dealer later tells police that the exchange occurred. Now, that's incredibly significant, because people are trying to say, including her defense, that she is being set up, that this dope dealer is trying to get a better deal for themselves and making up this. Well, I find it incredibly coincidental that they say, the drug dealer says, I met at this gas station, and police then find a forensic ping on the same day that puts Kouri Richins at that gas station.
Mike King, your thoughts about this part of the evidence, right? The credibility of a drug dealer who's accused of drugs, fentanyl, in Utah. What's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect place to attack, isn't it? And frankly, you're dealing with people who have a reputation that's already tainted, but that's the way it works. You got to sometimes use people within the pyramid to get further up the ladder. And so it doesn't necessarily bother me, especially because the state, I believe, has been successful in corroborating that drug dealer's testimony by saying, hey, it's not just this person saying it, who's, by the way, on probation and may or may not have been twisted a little bit by law enforcement, but she says, hey, somebody drove me there. They can corroborate the fact that I delivered dope to this location. And you know, this stuff, sometimes we kind of minimize how powerful fentanyl is. I mean, this is a terribly addictive drug, but when you start thinking of it in the old days of the things that I dealt with a lot, which was heroin and maybe morphine and those kinds of drug abuses, fentanyl is 50 times stronger than those drugs, Vinny. And this guy had 5 times what was required to kill him in his system. I mean, that doesn't happen on your own.
Hey everybody, it's Mike from Profiling Evil. I've been studying criminal behavior for more than 40 years, and one of my favorite research tools is Truth Finder. It's online, and you're not going to believe the information stored there. So if you want to know more about that new neighbor, your babysitter, or your next online date, give Truth Finder a try. I'm including a link below with special discount pricing. You got to click the link to get it, and then enter EVIL10 at checkout. We're an affiliate, which means we get a small commission, enough to buy a small Diet Dr. Pepper, but you can cancel at any time. Thanks for listening today.
Especially since the gas station is a long way from where we are. In fact, right now, folks, we're driving through a place called Oakley. It's the site of the world's biggest little rodeo. I hope you'll look it up. It's a place we usually go to in the summertime just for fun to get the family away and go see some really cool things. It's also the gateway into a place called Wolf Creek Pass that goes over into a place where, as a boy, I spent many of my summers on a family ranch. Now, let's get back to this story. So, February 14th, Valentine's Day, Eric survives what could have been an attempt on his life. Now, a month later, Kouri Richins is purchasing more illicit fentanyl. And then on March 4th, Eric has another fatal event in his bed. And this one was really intriguing because here, Kouri says that she gives him a drink, he goes to bed, they have a child that's having a hard time sleeping, and she goes and sleeps with that child and comes back to the bed. I want you to listen to my comments on Court TV where I talk about the things that trouble me in regard to the way in which that body of Eric's is discovered by first responders and the testimony that Kouri gives. I want to thank Vinnie Politan for allowing me to join him to talk about these criminal cases. And so we're going to jump over and listen to that for a moment.
And then I want to just add one thing, and that was, I'm a little troubled, and I hope that the medical examiner brings out in the examination in trial the body's condition, because if that body was cold in bed, it was probably starting to stiffen up with rigor mortis and other things. It would have taken a little bit of an act to get that thing out of that body out of the bed and at the bottom of the bed in whatever condition they try to say they found him in. And so hopefully body cams from those deputies going to show his physical location, because I think that's going to play big in this one.
Absolutely. All right, Mike King, Dr. Robbie Ludwig staying with us.
Well, prosecutors are alleging that Kouri would have profited financially from Eric's death because that would have then negated the losses that she experienced by that prenuptial agreement and put her as a surviving family member and receive those funds. Now, the thing that I find so interesting is as they looked into the records, they discovered a couple of things. One, an email from Eric's finance and insurance guy who, before he died, sent him a note asking why his insurance policy was changed so that the sole beneficiary was Kouri Richins, his wife. Well, Eric had no idea, but obviously had already made this statement to family that if something happens to me, look at my wife. I think she's trying to poison me. And he did something that kind of reminded me of the B.O.L.O. Daybell case with little JJ and Charles B.O.L.O. What Eric did was he took Kouri, without her knowledge, completely off the beneficiary list on his life insurance policy and put it in his sister's name with her having sole right and power of attorney to control the estate. Can you believe how coincidental that is? Because Charles B.O.L.O. did the same thing when he discovered that Lori was trying to get the sole beneficiary of his money as well. And he transferred that over to Kay Woodcock to take care of little JJ. And frankly, it'd be interesting to see what the Woodcocks are doing with that money now that JJ is gone. But let's get back to this story, because now imagine how angry she is days after when she wakes up and finds out that she's not going to be the beneficiary of that money. In fact, just recently, she filed a lawsuit against Eric's estate to try to claim some of that money, even while she's sitting in jail awaiting murder charges. Let's watch my interview on Court TV as we discuss this case a little further.
Mike King, you're the host of the Profiling Evil podcast. Does this sound like evil, more evil, or more perhaps stupid?
Boy, I think what's happening is reality is setting in as they're sitting in this courtroom. Absolutely, you can argue that, oh, yeah, I was just trying to find out what all of this is happening around me because of this. But that's the beauty of a criminal case that's put together properly, and that is that one piece of evidence builds upon the next and upon the next, and pretty soon the building blocks paint a picture that's pretty hard to overcome, and I think she's got a lot to overcome in this case. You know, even thinking of the cellular data, whether they were hitting global positioning or whether they were using Wi-Fi or the triangulation that we've talked about on so many other occasions, it doesn't matter. It's putting her in the location where things are pertinent. That digital footprint of deleting texts is still putting her communicating with this confidential informant who's going to prove, I think, to be pretty darn valuable. And again, all of that in totality takes this circumstantial case and makes it, I think, pretty dang convincing. I feel like I watched a trial today, Vinny. All we did was go to a bail hearing.
Absolutely.
Well, as we pull into Camas, Utah, and the location where Eric lived and died, I wanted to take some time and just pay close attention to what my mobile phone is doing. You know, we talk about cellular coverage in rural areas a lot. And I mentioned this on Court TV, that it's going to be really interesting to gather the forensic data and the digital forensic data that they have on Kouri Richins and Eric Richins, and of course this drug dealer and others who are associated with the case. But one of the things that is going to be difficult to prove is how accurate the location was on the phones, if in fact they're using triangulation, bouncing off of 3 different cell towers, instead of getting the actual physical location of the mobile device. And that's going to be, I think, one of the challenges that they have. And when you're in an area with poor cellular coverage, it's really difficult for the phone to make that determination. And so you'll see this drifting as the phone moves from location to location, trying to figure out where it is. I hope this is helpful, and I really want to know your thoughts about what happened. You see, Kouri Richins didn't get the bail that she'd hoped. She wanted to get out and prepare for her trial, but the judge sided with the state and said that she was a risk, a flight risk. Now, go back and watch my other video where I say baloney to the bug out bag idea. I don't think that had anything to do with whether she was coming or going. This was a year after this murder happened, although she knew she was under investigation, and I suspect that she knew that the noose was tightening around her. But nonetheless, I don't think she was preparing to leave. I think if she had gotten all that money, then things might be a little different. So I want to know what your thoughts are, and I want you to respond down below. And you know, the reason I felt compelled to do this video this weekend was because it's Father's Day weekend in the United States. And Eric Richins isn't around for Father's Day. His kids don't even have a mother around on Father's Day because she's sitting in the Summit County jail. And probably the most troubling thing is those children don't have a father. That's the real sad news of all of this. There are no winners, even if law enforcement and the prosecution are on target with Kouri Richins being the person responsible for Eric's death. There are no winners. Hopefully, there will be justice. And I want to know what you think. So please put your comments down below. And hey, and make sure you're checking us out on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and of course, Facebook. And folks, listen to us on Profiling Evil Podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. And from all of us here at Profiling Evil, thanks so much for your support. We'll see you soon at the next crime scene.